Hey guys, tonight we're heading into the kind of story that makes you wonder just how long you'd last if you were suddenly dropped into a 19th century Arctic expedition. I mean, picture it. Ice stretching endlessly in every direction. The air so cold it makes your nose hairs freeze, and you standing there in your slightly too thin parka, wondering why no one told you that your breath can turn into tiny icicles that stick to your scarf. Yeah, spoiler alert, you're not making it far. In fact, if you were hoping for a nice, cozy little adventure up north, you might want to pack a few extra fingers. You know, just in case some get frostbitten and fall off. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment down below. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. I'd love to know who's listening in the dark with me tonight. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You take a step forward and immediately your boots crunch into snow that feels like it's been there for centuries. Because, well, it probably has. The wind cuts across your cheeks like a whip, and your breath huffs out in little puffs, hanging briefly in the air before vanishing into the endless white. The sky above is a washed-out gray. So low and heavy, it feels like it could press you flat against the frozen ground. There's no birdsong, no rustle of trees, just the slow, endless creak of the ice shifting beneath your feet, as if the earth itself is quietly groaning under the weight of all that frozen time. You keep walking, but your toes are starting to tingle. No, actually, they're starting to go numb. And you think back to the early Arctic explorers, those poor souls in the 1800s who thought it was a great idea to go poking around the poles with wool mittens and a flask of brandy. Have you ever heard of the Franklin expedition? Oh, we'll get to them. But for now, just imagine being in their boots. Well, assuming your boots weren't frozen solid. They set off with high hopes and polished brass buttons and... well, let's just say they didn't pack enough snacks. Or enough warm socks. Or enough anything, really. Your fingers feel stiff as you tuck them into your armpits for warmth, just like they told you to do in that one winter survival video you saw once on YouTube. But here's the thing. They never mentioned how the sweat from your body, trapped inside those many layers of wool and fur, can actually make you colder. That's right. In the Arctic, your own sweat can betray you, freezing into tiny needles against your skin. It's like your body is trying to sabotage itself. Thanks a lot, biology. The wind picks up, a sharp, whistling sound that makes the ice crackle underfoot. It almost sounds like the ice is talking to you, whispering secrets of explorers past, maybe. Or maybe it's just the sound of your brain slowly freezing. Who knows? You shift your weight, and there's that eerie sensation of standing on something that might not be solid much longer. Ice can be funny like that. One minute it's rock hard, the next it's splintering beneath you, swallowing up sleds, dogs, and dreams alike. You pause for a moment, catching your breath, and notice something odd. A faint, dark smear on the horizon. As you trudge closer, your breath catching in little icy gasps, it resolves into the shape of a half-buried wooden crate. It's old, weathered, the edges gnawed by time and cold. A relic of an expedition, perhaps. Some poor soul's lost cargo, drifting for decades before the ice finally spit it back up to the surface. You brush off the snow and read the faded letters. Biscuits, 1847. You chuckle, wondering if they're still edible. Then remember the story of how explorers sometimes gnawed on ship timbers when food ran out. Not exactly Michelin star dining. Your ears sting as the wind howls again, and for a moment, you think about the Inuit hunters who thrived in this brutal landscape. No GPS, no down jackets, no TikToks to complain on. Just generations of hard-earned wisdom, like how to build a snow shelter with the right kind of snow. Yes, there is a right kind of snow. or how to stay warm with a mixture of seal oil and moss. They knew the land's moods, unlike you, standing here with your eyelashes freezing together and your nose turning an alarming shade of purple. You try to shake the thought, but your stomach growls and you remember reading somewhere that the average 19th century Arctic explorer burned around 5,000 calories a day just existing. Which, honestly, sounds like the kind of diet plan no influencer would ever recommend. Lose weight fast by freezing to death in the Arctic. Not exactly a bestseller. A shiver rattles down your spine, and you glance back over your shoulder. The wind has swept your tracks away already, erasing every step you've taken like you were never here at all. It's a humbling, slightly terrifying thought that out here, in this frozen world, time moves on whether you do or not. You huddle deeper into your coat, exhaling a frosty sigh, and as you keep moving, each step a tiny defiance against the cold, the silence presses in. The Arctic doesn't care about your plans, your dreams, or your to-do list. It just is. Vast, ancient, indifferent. You start to feel it deep in your bones. The slow, creeping cold that isn't just in your skin, but in your very soul. And you wonder, not for the first time tonight, why on earth did anyone want to explore this place? The wind doesn't let up. It gnaws at your face, slipping cold fingers into every gap in your clothing. You tug your scarf higher, but it's stiff with frost, crackling against your cheeks like a starched linen napkin. Your eyelashes, by the way, are now sticking together. Yep, congratulations. You've joined the elite club of people who've accidentally frozen their own eyelids shut. It's not a particularly exclusive club, but hey, welcome aboard. You stumble a bit as the snow under your boots crunches, then shifts, because, surprise, that's not solid ground beneath you. It's a thin crust over a hidden drift. You sink in up to your knees, and snow pours into your boots like cold, wet cement. Instinctively, you flail your arms, which is both embarrassing and totally ineffective. You stand there, looking like a half-buried snowman, while the Arctic wind whistles past your ears, probably laughing at you. As you struggle to climb out, you remember a story. Have you ever heard of poor Sir John Ross and his victory expedition back in 1830? He and his crew were stuck in the ice for 4 whole years. 4 years. That's enough time to binge-watch Friends at least 20 times over. They survived by eating what little they could, mostly walrus meat, frozen biscuits, and occasionally the odd scrap of boiled leather. Fun fact, chewing on your boots might technically count as dinner when you're desperate enough. But what really sticks with you about Ross is the sheer stubbornness it takes to stay in a frozen wasteland for 4 winters. Imagine the cabin fever, sharing a cramped wooden ship with the same handful of people, day in and day out, as the ice squeezes the hull tighter and tighter. You can almost hear the creaks of the ship's timbers groaning under the relentless pressure, while outside, the world is locked in a deep freeze, silent and uncaring. And inside, well, let's just say tempers ran thin. People started arguing over the smallest things. Who ate the last biscuit? Who snored too loud? Who hogged the only half-decent blanket? You think you're annoyed when your roommate leaves a dish in the sink? Imagine being trapped in a ship for 4 years while the Arctic tries to kill you, one frostbitten toe at a time. You shake the snow out of your boots. Well, try to. And keep moving. Each step a reminder that yes, your toes are still attached. For now. The cold gnaws at your fingertips, and you remember something else. In the 19th century, frostbite wasn't just an inconvenience. It was a sentence. Once the tissue froze, it was often amputated. No fancy hospitals, no sterile tools, just a rusty saw, a bottle of brandy, and a very strong friend to hold you down. You shudder at the thought and flex your fingers, trying to will the blood back into them. The wind gusts again, and for a moment, the horizon blurs into a whiteout. You squint, trying to make out shapes, anything to orient yourself. And then, as if conjured by the cold itself, a shape emerges. A figure bundled in furs, dragging a sled piled high with supplies. They move slowly, steadily, like they've been doing this forever. And they have, in a way. Indigenous Arctic peoples, like the Inuit, had been mastering these lands long before European explorers even knew what a polar bear looked like. They had the knowledge, the tools, the experience, everything you don't. You watch the figure fade into the swirling snow and feel a little humbled, honestly. These folks knew how to survive in a world where you, let's be honest, wouldn't last a week. Your stomach growls. You fumble in your pocket, hoping for a snack. But all you have is a crushed granola bar and a half-frozen lip balm. Not exactly the hearty fare of Arctic adventurers, who, by the way, used to pack barrels of salted meat, hardtack biscuits, and something called portable soup, which sounds fancy but was basically a gelatinous meat paste that tasted like sadness and regret. And yet, it was considered a culinary innovation of the time. Bon appetit. You press on, boots crunching in the snow, each step feeling heavier than the last. And then, just as you're starting to wonder if you're going in circles, you spot something strange. A wooden post sticking up from the snow, its edges splintered and worn by the wind. You brush away the ice, revealing a faded name carved into the wood. Beachy Island, 1845. A chill runs deeper than the cold through your spine. This was one of the Franklin expedition's campsites. You stand there for a moment, thinking about the men who wintered here, buried some of their dead here. 3 graves, simple snow-covered mounds in the endless white. Their names lost to history, their bones still frozen in the permafrost. The air feels heavier now, as if the past is pressing down on you. You exhale, watching your breath curl into the cold, and think about the historians, still debating whether the Franklin crew perished from lead poisoning, starvation, or the sheer unrelenting cruelty of the Arctic. The mystery lingers, like a fog that never quite lifts. And as you move on, your feet crunching in the snow, you can't help but wonder, would you have survived a single winter out here? Would you have lasted even a week? Or would you, like so many before, have become just another shadow swallowed by the ice? You adjust your scarf, or what's left of it, around your neck, though it feels like wrapping a tissue around a tree and hoping it'll keep the wind out. The Arctic isn't impressed by your efforts. The gusts tear at your clothing, making the fabric snap and flap like it's trying to escape this madness. Your boots crunch forward, and for a fleeting moment, you think you see a shape in the distance. Something large, looming. Maybe a ship? Nope. It's a mirage. You blink, and it vanishes into the swirling white. The Arctic is like that. Tricksy, in a way that makes you question whether you're a body wandering through snow or a speck in a giant, indifferent freezer where reality bends a little at the edges. And speaking of ships, have you ever heard about the Franklin expedition? Yep, we're back to that story because, honestly, it's the Arctic horror tale that just keeps on giving. Imagine this. 2 sturdy ships, the Erebus and the Terror, outfitted with all the latest Victorian technology, steam engines, reinforced hulls, even libraries stocked with books about botany and the Bible. They set off in 1845, ready to conquer the Northwest Passage. Spoiler alert, they didn't. They got stuck, for years, literally frozen into place, like bugs trapped in amber. The ships became prisons, slowly crushed by the moving ice, while the men, oh, the poor men, were forced to abandon ship and trek across a frozen wasteland, dragging sledges filled with supplies and whatever dignity they had left. It's like a real-life game of how long can you survive before you eat your boots? Except no one was winning. And here's the kicker. They even had canned food. Sounds modern, right? Well, sort of. The problem was, the cans were hastily sealed with lead solder. Because, of course, what's an Arctic disaster without a touch of industrial negligence? That lead likely seeped into the food, slowly poisoning the crew as they starved and froze. It's like being betrayed by your own rations. You can't even trust a can of peas out here. You shuffle forward, your legs starting to feel like cold iron bars, and you can't help but picture one of those sledges. Massive, weighed down with crates of gear, and probably a few personal trinkets. A locket with a faded portrait, maybe, or a little tin of tea leaves from home. They hauled those sledges for miles across the ice, while their fingers blackened, and their lips cracked so deeply they couldn't even speak. Some of the men left behind journals, their writing getting shakier as the days dragged on, like the ink itself was freezing along with their bodies. And yet, somehow, in the middle of all that misery, there were still moments of dark humor. One man wrote about how they tried to have a Christmas feast on the ice, using the last of their rations to make a sad, lumpy pudding. It probably tasted like regret and desperation, but hey, at least they tried. You almost have to admire the spirit. A Christmas party in the middle of an Arctic nightmare? That's peak British optimism right there. Your own stomach growls a sharp, hollow sound that echoes in your ears, and you think about how much you'd pay right now for a steaming bowl of stew. Anything warm, really. Even if it came with a side of lead poisoning, you'd probably consider it. You sigh and try to shake the thought away, focusing instead on the strange, beautiful stillness around you. The snow drifts rise like frozen waves, the ice catching the faintest glimmers of light in jagged shards. It's so quiet you can hear your own heartbeat, steady, a little fast but still there, for now. Then, as you crest a small hill of snow, you nearly trip over it. A frozen carcass. It's a seal, stiff as stone, its dark eyes glazed over with ice. You stare at it for a moment, feeling a strange mix of pity and envy. At least it's done with the waiting. The Arctic is full of stories like that. Frozen explorers, frozen animals, frozen everything. Time just stops here, like a clock left ticking in an empty room, waiting for someone to come back and wind it up again. You shiver and keep moving, your breath ragged and sharp in your throat. The cold seems to press in from all sides, a weight you can't shake. And you remember reading that some explorers, when things got really bad, would try to warm themselves by huddling in the carcasses of animals. Yes, you heard that right. It's like an extremely grim version of a sleeping bag. You wonder, briefly, what it must have been like, crawling into a hollowed-out seal or reindeer, feeling the last bits of warmth leach into your frozen bones. And you decide, right then and there, that no, you wouldn't survive a 19th century Arctic winter. You'd barely make it out of a day. The wind howls again, whipping snow into your face like sharp little needles, and you laugh bitterly. Because really, what else can you do? Out here, laughter feels like the only thing the cold can't steal from you. And as the snow swirls around you, you press forward. Boots crunching, breath misting in the air, feeling like the ice itself is watching, waiting for you to stop. The sky is the color of wet wool, heavy and low, pressing down like an old, scratchy blanket. You squint up at it, wondering if it's always been this dull shade of gray, or if you're just starting to forget what color the world's supposed to be. You shuffle onward, your breath huffing in short, frozen bursts, and the wind tugs at your coat like an impatient toddler. Except this toddler is made of ice and wants to peel your skin off. Your boots crunch over a patch of hard-packed snow, and you catch a whiff of something, sharp, oily, and vaguely fishy. You pause, sniffing the air, and realize you've stumbled across a makeshift camp. A low, smoldering fire struggles to stay alive, and beside it, a few scraps of blubber lie abandoned in the snow, glistening like frozen candle wax. You wrinkle your nose, because honestly, the smell is enough to make your stomach turn. But out here, that blubber was life. It's called muktuk, whale skin and blubber, eaten raw or frozen, rich in vitamin C, which, as you learned earlier, keeps scurvy from turning your gums into a horror show. The Inuit knew this. Arctic explorers, not so much. You think back to the doomed Franklin expedition again. Yeah, we keep coming back to those poor souls, and how some of them probably had access to muktuk but didn't know to eat it. Instead, they gnawed on lead-laced biscuits and watched their teeth fall out one by one. They should have just asked the locals, you mutter to yourself. But of course they didn't. Arrogance has a way of freezing faster than water in the Arctic. You nudge a piece of frozen blubber with your boot, and it clinks against the ice like a chunk of soap. You're not sure you'd have the stomach for it, but when the choice is between that and starving, well, you'd probably at least try a bite. After all, the Arctic doesn't care if you're picky. It'll kill you either way. The wind shifts, and you hear a strange, low growl, like a grumble in the distance, deep and guttural. Your breath catches in your throat, and you glance around, heart thumping. And then, as if summoned by your worst fears, a massive white shape lumbers into view. It's a polar bear. And it's majestic, yes, but also terrifyingly big. Like, could casually swat you across the ice big. It sniffs the air, its nose twitching, and you freeze. Because, well, what do you do when you see a polar bear? Play dead? Climb a tree? Good luck finding a tree out here. Bang pots together? Yeah, because you totally packed a cookware set for your spontaneous Arctic death march. The thing is, polar bears don't play by the rules. They're not just curious, they're hungry. They've been known to stalk people for miles, waiting for the right moment. They can smell food, or you, sweaty and exhausted, from a long way off. And they're perfectly happy to treat you like a warm, crunchy snack. You stay very, very still, your breath shallow, as the bear sniffs the air again, then ambles off, as if deciding you're not worth the effort. Which is somehow both a relief and a bit insulting. You exhale slowly, feeling your heart pounding in your ears, and remind yourself that in the 19th century, polar bear attacks were a real problem for explorers. They tried all kinds of tricks to ward them off. Flares, dogs, guns, but it wasn't always enough. In fact, there's a grim little story about an expedition where the cook got dragged out of his tent in the middle of the night by a bear. Some accounts say they fought it off with spoons and shovels. Imagine that, your last stand against a polar bear, armed with nothing but the kitchen cutlery. Yeah, you're definitely not surviving this. The bear disappears into the swirling snow, and you keep moving, your legs shaking just a little, not just from the cold now, but from the sheer weight of the realization. This place is alive. It's not just ice and snow. It's predators, starvation, and the relentless, grinding passage of time. And here's a quirky little fact to keep you warm tonight. Did you know polar bears have black skin under their fur? It helps them absorb heat from the sun, even in these frozen wastelands. Neat, huh? Not that it makes them any less terrifying. You press on, feeling the cold seep deeper into your bones. Your breath comes in ragged gasps now, and the snow underfoot feels more like quicksand. Soft in the wrong places, treacherous in others. Every few steps you sink a little, like the land is trying to pull you under. And as you trudge on, you hear that same eerie creaking sound from the ice beneath you, like a warning whispered in a language you can't quite understand. Somewhere in the distance, you think you hear a faint, rhythmic thudding. A sledge, maybe? Or just your imagination? It's hard to tell out here, where the wind plays tricks and the snow swallows sound whole. You glance back, half expecting to see footprints following you. But of course, the Arctic has erased them already. It's like you were never here. You press forward, your steps slow, Your breath shallow, your body starting to feel like it belongs more to the ice than to you. And you wonder again, why did they keep coming here? What drove those explorers to risk everything, to step into a world that could, and often did, swallow them whole? Your footsteps crunch on the snow, the sound swallowed almost instantly by the wind. It's strange how the Arctic makes even the smallest noises feel like they belong to someone else, like they drift up into the sky and vanish, never really yours to begin with. You pull your scarf tighter, though it's stiff now, like a strip of frozen cardboard, and you wonder if you should just give up trying to stay warm. The cold feels like it's winning. And then you spot it, a small cluster of stones, half buried in the snow. You brush the powder away with a gloved hand and find a scrap of something beneath. Wood? Bone? No. It's a fragment of a sled runner, cracked and splintered. A forgotten relic. Your fingers trace the curve of it, and you picture the men who drag these sleds across the ice, mile after agonizing mile, often with ropes lashed around their shoulders like pack animals. Imagine that, trudging across a frozen sea, hauling 1,000 pounds of supplies behind you, knowing full well that the ice beneath your feet might crack and swallow you whole at any moment. And sometimes it did. The Arctic doesn't care about your carefully packed sled or your best-laid plans. One minute you're upright, the next you're flailing in freezing water, your breath stolen by the shock of it. You scramble for a foothold, your mittens soaked, your boots heavy, and you think about the stories, like the tale of HMS Investigator, sent to rescue Franklin's crew, only to become ice-locked itself. The crew had to abandon ship and drag their sleds for hundreds of miles, some of them collapsing from exhaustion, their bodies left behind. Swallowed by the snow, you shiver, partly from the cold, partly from the weight of the stories swirling around you. And here's a weird little fact that might stick in your mind tonight. Did you know that some of those sledges were so overloaded that they carried items like fine china, books, even a piano? A piano. Imagine dragging that across the ice while your toes are turning black and falling off. The Victorians really knew how to pack for an apocalypse, didn't they? Excuse me, Captain. Should we bring more food or the decorative porcelain tea set? Tough call. You laugh, the sound thin and a little desperate in the empty air, and you keep moving. The wind kicks up, and the snow stings your cheeks like tiny shards of glass. You try not to think about how the explorers must have felt after weeks of this. Hunger gnawing at their bellies, the relentless wind gnawing at their skin. They didn't have modern gear, remember? No Gore-Tex, no insulated boots. They wrapped themselves in wool and animal skins, layered until they could barely move. And still, the cold seeped in, slow and steady, like water into a cracked boat. And then there's the matter of the dogs. You pause, listening, half expecting to hear a distant bark, but there's only the low moan of the wind. Dogs were essential, strong, loyal, often smarter than the men they worked alongside. They pulled sleds, sniffed out danger, and kept the men alive. And when times got desperate, well, let's just say not every dog made it back. There are stories, grim ones, about men eating their own sled dogs to survive. You shudder at the thought. Man's best friend turned into man's last meal. It's the kind of fact that sticks with you, lodged in your brain like a splinter. You push on, the snow crunching under your boots in a slow, steady rhythm. Your legs ache, your breath burns in your throat, and the wind howls like a chorus of ghosts. You squint against the blowing snow and remember another story. This one about Fridtjof Nansen, the Norwegian explorer. He tried a bold strategy. Rather than fighting the ice, he let it take his ship, the Fram, allowing it to drift with the ice pack across the Arctic. A gamble, but it worked. Well, sort of. They survived, though not without a few close calls. And here's a quirky detail. Nansen and his crew tried to keep warm, by wearing layers of reindeer skin, which, it turns out, is excellent at trapping heat, but also smells, let's just say, distinctive. Imagine living in that funk for months on end, with no showers, no laundry, and only your own grimy body for company. Your stomach growls again, louder this time, and you can't help but think about the food they packed for these journeys. Salted meat, ship's biscuit, dried peas, none of it exactly five-star dining. And sometimes when supplies ran low, they turned to the most desperate measures. There's an infamous story of men boiling down their boots, literally making a soup out of leather. It was tough, chewy, and probably tasted like, well, like boiled boots. But when you're starving in the middle of nowhere, anything looks edible, even your shoes. You shake the thought away and focus on your steps. One foot, then the other. The cold hums in your ears, and you feel a strange sense of detachment, like you're just a shadow moving through an endless white void. The snow swirls, the ice groans beneath you. Somewhere far, far away, the sun is probably shining on people who have never even heard of scurvy, or frostbite, or the quiet terror of wondering if the ice beneath their feet will hold. You pause, feeling the weight of it all. The cold, the hunger, the quiet, creeping fear. And you realize, with a tiny bitter smile, that no, you wouldn't survive a 19th century Arctic winter. Not even close. The wind seems to sigh now, lower and steadier, as if even it is growing tired of howling. But the cold, it doesn't tire. It seeps into your boots, stiffens your laces, and bites into your skin no matter how many layers you wear. You pause for a moment, shifting your weight from foot to foot, and your knees creak in protest. The snow stretches out in every direction, flat and featureless, like a giant white canvas that forgot to be painted on. You squint into the distance, and there, barely visible through the blowing snow, is a strange mound. Something built, not natural. You trudge toward it, boots dragging, breath rasping in your throat. As you get closer, you realize it's a shelter, a snow hut, a low, domed structure, carefully packed and shaped by hands that knew what they were doing. The entrance is a small tunnel, barely wide enough to crawl through, and you duck inside, half expecting it to collapse on you. But no, it holds. The walls are smooth, the air inside oddly still, muffled like a thick blanket pressed over the world. You sit back on your heels, breath fogging the air, and marvel for a moment at the ingenuity of it. This is a quinzhee, or maybe an igloo. There are differences, of course, but you're too cold and tired to care right now. The point is, it works. Snow, you realize, is an insulator. It traps air, holds warmth. That's why Inuit hunters could sleep in shelters like this, while you, out there in the open, would be turning into a human popsicle. You run your fingers along the walls, feeling the hard-packed snow, and think about how these shelters were made. You have to pile the snow, let it sinter. Yeah, that's a real word. So it fuses into a solid block, then hollow it out carefully. If you dig too soon, the walls collapse. If you dig too late, you're stuck outside in the dark. It's a delicate balance, and the fact that people figured this out centuries ago, kind of amazing, really. Meanwhile, you're over here shivering and wondering if your phone would even get a signal out here. Spoiler, it wouldn't. The quiet in the shelter is almost eerie. You can hear your own heartbeat, the rasp of your breath, and somewhere far off, the distant, faint cracking of the ice. It's a sound explorers used to dread, that slow, groaning shift beneath their feet, the ice moving like a living thing. You imagine it. A ship moored in the middle of the ice pack, the wooden beams creaking, the hull groaning, the men inside trying to sleep, while outside, the ice slowly tightens its grip like a fist closing around a helpless insect. You shift uncomfortably, trying to shake the image from your mind. But the stories come back anyway, like the tale of the Jeanette. An American ship that set out in 1879, full of hope and optimism, only to get trapped in the Arctic ice. The crew spent 2 years drifting, helpless, before the ship was finally crushed. They abandoned it, dragging lifeboats across the ice in a desperate attempt to reach Siberia. Some made it, many didn't. And here's a grim little tidbit. The captain, George DeLong, was found clutching his journal, the last entries written in a shaky hand as he slowly froze to death. Your fingers twitch involuntarily at that. A journal. You wonder if you'd have the presence of mind to write down your last thoughts, or if you just curl up and let the snow take you. And then, because the universe has a dark sense of humor, you remember that some explorers did exactly that. Curl up in the snow, hands over their faces, as if to block out the final moment. They called it the Arctic death pose, and it's been found more than once. Bodies preserved by the cold like fragile time capsules. You sigh and stretch your legs, feeling the pins and needles as circulation struggles to return. You reach into your pocket and pull out a granola bar, or what's left of one, crumbled, cold, hard as a rock. You gnaw on it, the taste a mix of cardboard and desperation, and you wonder how much better, or worse, hardtack biscuits must have been. They were the staple of Arctic rations. Flour, water, maybe a little salt, baked into a brick so hard you could probably use it to hammer nails. And they often came with a bonus feature. Weevils. Tiny, wriggly, protein-packed weevils. Extra calories if you're lucky. If you're not, well, they were just part of the deal. You grin a little at the thought. Survival, 19th century style. Eat your bugs, huddle in a snow hut, hope the ice doesn't swallow you whole. Historians still debate whether the explorers should have listened more to the indigenous peoples, learned the art of survival, instead of insisting on dragging European ways into the Arctic. But you, sitting here with numb fingers and a frozen granola bar, you're starting to think they had a point. Outside, the wind howls again, and a shiver crawls up your spine. You glance at the low entrance of the shelter, wondering if you should move on, or just stay here, curled up, waiting for the cold to decide what to do with you. You breathe in the sharp, cold air, and you realize this place doesn't care if you're brave or smart or prepared. The Arctic has no sympathy. It simply is. And you're just a guest, passing through. You crawl out of the snow hut, brushing frost off your shoulders, and as soon as you step back into the open, the cold hits you like a slap. The wind cuts across the flat, white expanse, tugging at your clothes, and you feel it in your bones. You're small here, so very, very small. Your footprints crunch behind you, a fragile trail against the endless white. But even as you walk, they begin to disappear, swallowed up by drifting snow. You pull your coat tighter, though, let's be honest, it's about as effective as wrapping yourself in a wet towel, and keep moving. Your breath huffs out in little clouds, and for a moment, you think you see something ahead. A cluster of dark shapes. You squint, eyes stinging, and as you get closer, you realize it's a sled. Abandoned, half buried in a drift, ropes tangled and frozen solid. You reach out, tug at the side, and it creaks. Wood brittle with cold, leather straps stiff as boards, and scattered around it, bones. Not a lot, just a few. A cracked femur, the curve of a rib, a tooth half buried in the snow like some grim treasure. You stare at them, wondering whose they were. Some explorer, maybe. Or a dog. Hard to tell, really. The Arctic doesn't leave tidy answers. You remember reading once that early expeditions often left their dead where they fell, marking them with simple cairns if they had the time, or sometimes not at all. Bodies preserved for centuries, frozen into the ice, waiting to be found by someone like you. Someone stumbling across the past, shivering, breath fogging in the air. Your stomach twists a little, and you step back, boots crunching on the snow. The wind gusts, rattling through the bones with a hollow, whistling sound. And for a moment, you swear it almost sounds like a voice. Just a whisper, carried on the air. It's probably nothing. Or maybe it's the Arctic itself, muttering stories of those who came before, those who didn't make it, those who thought they could outlast the cold. You glance up at the sky. It's that strange, washed-out gray again, a color you're starting to hate. The sun is little more than a dim smudge, barely enough to cast a shadow. And you wonder how those early explorers kept track of time. Days blurred together in the endless light of summer, then vanished into the long, black tunnel of Arctic winter. Some of them even went a little off. There are stories of men carving elaborate chess sets out of walrus ivory, only to get into fistfights over the rules. One crew reportedly held a masquerade ball, complete with costumes cobbled together from whatever scraps they had. Imagine a man in a tattered curtain, pretending to be a king. While outside, the ice pressed in. The human mind is funny like that, desperate for distraction, even as the world tries to kill you. Your own mind is starting to wander too. You think about home, warm rooms, the smell of coffee brewing, a bed that doesn't involve a layer of frozen caribou skin. The contrast is so sharp, it almost feels like a joke. You chuckle softly, though there's not much humor in it. Out here, you start to understand how the cold isn't just physical. It gets into your head. It whispers things like you can't do this, and why bother going on? And wouldn't it be easier to just stop? You shake yourself, literally, trying to rattle those thoughts loose. But they linger, like frost clinging to a window pane. And you remember another grim little fact. Some explorers, after weeks or months of bitter cold, would simply wander off into the snow. No note, no explanation, just gone. It's called the Arctic Madness, or at least it was in the old journals. Historians still argue about whether it was scurvy, lead poisoning, or just the mind slowly unraveling under the weight of endless ice. Maybe it was all three. You wonder, briefly, if you're feeling a bit of it yourself. Your fingers are so numb now that you have to look at them to make sure they're still there. You wiggle them, and they move, slowly, stiffly, like they belong to someone else. You rub them against your coat, trying to coax warmth back into the tips, and think about how explorers used to rely on rubbing snow into frostbitten skin, thinking it would help. It didn't, of course. Just another thing they got wrong. And speaking of getting things wrong, here's a fun little fact for your frozen brain to chew on. Some 19th century Arctic explorers tried to use reindeer as pack animals. Reindeer in the Arctic. Sounds smart, right? Except the reindeer kept running off. Turns out, they're not exactly fans of being harnessed to sledges and dragged across the ice. Who knew? So the explorers had to chase their runaway reindeer across the snow, which is about as ridiculous as it sounds. You imagine it, a man in a fur coat, cursing under his breath, boots sinking into drifts, waving his arms at a herd of stubborn reindeer, while his expedition slowly starves behind him. The wind shifts, bringing with it a sharper, colder bite, and you feel it in your bones, like a warning. You glance back at the sled, at the bones, and think, maybe they were chasing reindeer once too. Maybe they thought they could outsmart the Arctic. And maybe, just maybe, the Arctic decided otherwise. You shiver, pull your scarf higher, and press on, because what else is there to do? Your breath comes in shallow, ragged puffs now, each one a tiny cloud that fades almost as quickly as it forms. Your legs ache, an old, deep kind of ache, like the bones themselves are tired of holding you up. The wind whistles, sharp and cold, tugging at your clothes, and your eyelids feel heavy, rimmed with tiny icicles that make blinking a slow, deliberate act. You trudge forward, because really, what else can you do? The Arctic isn't about grand decisions. It's about the small, stubborn act of taking the next step, and the next, and the next. The snow shifts under your boots, a subtle, unnerving sound, like walking on thin glass. You pause, feeling that faint, sinking sensation, and it dawns on you. You're on sea ice now, solid enough to walk on, for the moment, but thin in places, fragile, treacherous. You take a careful step, feeling the give beneath your foot, and your stomach clenches. It's the kind of realization that makes your heart beat faster, even though you know you need to stay calm. Panic is the worst thing out here. Well, that and falling into the freezing water. You think about the explorers who face this exact danger. Men hauling heavy sleds across the ice, listening for the telltale cracks, knowing that one wrong step could send them plunging into water so cold it could stop a heart in seconds. Some of them tied themselves together with ropes, hoping that if one fell in, the others could pull him out. But sometimes, the ice just opened up and swallowed the whole party, sleds and all, without so much as a ripple left behind. You glance down at the ice under your feet, frosted over, opaque, with cracks radiating like spider webs in the blue depths. It's beautiful in a way, and horrifying. The sound of it creaking is like a whisper, a warning. You take another step, trying to distribute your weight, and wonder, would you even feel it if the ice gave way? Or would you just be there one moment, gone the next? Another mystery for future explorers to puzzle over. And speaking of puzzles, here's a quirky fact to warm your frozen brain. Did you know that some 19th century Arctic explorers believed in open polar seas? They thought that if you just pushed far enough north, the ice would give way to warm, open water, a kind of hidden tropical paradise at the top of the world. Sounds nice, right? Like a frozen dessert with a gooey center. Spoiler alert, it's not. They were wrong, of course, but the idea was so persistent that several expeditions risked everything chasing that dream. Imagine hauling sledges across miles of shifting, groaning ice, hoping that just over the next ridge you'd find palm trees swaying in the breeze. Yeah, no. You smirk a little at the thought, even though your lips are cracked and your teeth ache from the cold. It's a ridiculous idea, but you get it. Hope does strange things to a person, especially out here. It keeps you moving, even when you probably shouldn't. It makes you look at the horizon and think, just a little farther. And sometimes, that hope is the only thing standing between you and the slow, creeping pull of the ice. You keep walking, your boots scraping against the ice, and you spot something ahead. Dark shapes, small and clustered. As you get closer, you realize they're sled dogs, huddled together in a tight knot, their breath puffing in the air. They look at you, their eyes wary but calm, like they know exactly where they are and what they're doing. You envy them, in a way. They've been here before. They know how to hunker down, how to conserve energy, how to wait out the worst of it. You remember reading how explorers depended on these dogs, not just for pulling sleds, but for companionship, warmth, and, yes, sometimes, food. There's a grim pause in your thoughts there. Dogs who were beloved team members one week became the difference between survival and starvation the next. You look at the dogs and they stare back, tails thumping the snow in a slow, tired rhythm. They know something you don't. You're sure of it. Maybe it's how to endure. Or maybe it's just when to lie down and rest. You wonder if that's a lesson you should be learning right about now. But no, there's still light, faint and gray, filtering through the clouds. You press on, though your breath is ragged, your fingers numb, and your legs feel like they belong to someone else. The cold has sunk so deep that it's not even sharp anymore. It's a dull, humming ache, like you've become part of the landscape, a moving icicle, clinging to the hope that you'll see something, anything, that isn't just snow and sky, and the endless, relentless wind. You pause, just for a moment, and listen. The dogs have gone quiet. The ice is groaning softly beneath you, a deep, slow, rhythmic sound that feels alive. And in the distance, the wind carries something strange, faint, rhythmic, almost like a drumbeat. You tilt your head, listening harder, and wonder if it's your own pulse, hammering in your ears. Or maybe it's the Arctic itself, beating its slow, ancient heart beneath the ice, reminding you, once again, that you don't belong here. The sound fades as quickly as it came, swallowed up by the endless hush of the Arctic, leaving you standing there, heart pounding in your chest, breath fogging the air like a steam engine gone cold. You shake your head, try to convince yourself it was nothing, just the wind, the groaning ice, maybe the faint echoes of your own bones creaking. But as you take another step, you feel it again, that low, deep, almost imperceptible vibration beneath your boots. A shiver crawls up your spine, and you realize you're standing on what the old explorers used to call pressure ridge. Pressure ridges, yeah, they sound harmless, like a bump in the snow. But they're not. They're where the ice, under the slow grinding forces of the ocean currents, buckles and splinters and rears up in jagged shards like frozen tectonic plates. Some of these ridges tower higher than a man, sharp-edged walls of ice that groan and shift and sometimes collapse without warning, snapping like the world's biggest frozen pretzel. You stare at the ridge in front of you, blue and white and laced with fractures, and wonder how many explorers walked straight into one, only to find their path blocked by a wall of ice as stubborn and unyielding as time itself. And then you remember. There's a story about a man, Elisha Kent Kane, who, back in the 1850s, led an expedition through the Arctic, looking for the lost Franklin ships. He and his crew had to hack their way through pressure ridges for days, sometimes making less than a mile of progress in 24 hours. Imagine that. You struggle to make it to the kitchen when the Wi-Fi's down, and these guys were out here, chipping at ice with picks and shovels, their faces cracked from the cold, fingers swollen and blackened, eating frozen biscuits and hoping not to freeze solid before they found, well, anything. You inch forward, boots crunching, eyes scanning for cracks, and your mind wanders, because that's what it does when the cold starts gnawing at your edges. You think about the little things, like how your teeth ache in the cold air, each breath a tiny needle, or how your beard, if you had one, would be frosted stiff by now. Did you know Arctic explorers used to rub grease into their beards to stop them from freezing solid? Whale blubber, mostly. Imagine the smell. It's like an Arctic spa day, but instead of cucumber water, it's fish oil and frostbite. The snow underfoot shifts, and you nearly lose your balance. Your arms flail, and for a second, you're sure you're going down. But somehow, you stay upright. Your heart is racing now, the kind of adrenaline that feels like a warning more than a triumph. And as you catch your breath, you think about another odd detail. Some explorers tried to float across the Arctic. Literally. They built makeshift rafts, hoping to ride the currents like driftwood. It was a bold idea, sure, but the Arctic had other plans. The currents didn't always go where you wanted. The ice didn't cooperate. And the ocean, it didn't care about your clever little raft. It just kept moving. You blink hard, trying to clear the fog of exhaustion from your brain, and notice the dogs again, curled up in tight balls, noses tucked under their tails, frost rimming their whiskers. They're smart, these dogs. They know when to rest. You, on the other hand, keep pushing forward, even as the cold gnaws at your toes, your fingers, the tips of your ears. You remember reading somewhere that frostbite doesn't actually feel cold at first. It starts as a numbness, a tingling that fades into nothing. A quiet kind of danger, like the ice itself, waiting. You rub your hands together, trying to will the feeling back into them, and think about how the explorers kept journals. Long, rambling entries scrawled in shaky hands, describing the endless white, the groaning ice, the bone-deep cold. They wrote about the small things, how the tea froze in the cup before it could be drunk, how the oil lamps sputtered and died, how the ship creaked like an old man's bones, settling in for the night. And they wrote about the silence, that deep, heavy quiet that settles over the ice when the wind dies down. A silence so complete, it feels like the world has forgotten to breathe. You pause, listening, and there it is, the silence. It's not comforting, it's oppressive, heavy, like a weight pressing down on your chest. You realize, with a strange sinking feeling, that this is the kind of quiet that drove men mad. The kind of quiet where your own thoughts get too loud, where the cold seeps into your bones and whispers, "Why bother?" You shiver, hard, and force yourself to move again, boots crunching in the snow. The pressure ridge looms ahead, jagged and sharp, a frozen monument to the chaos beneath the surface. You think about how the ice is always moving, even when it seems still. It shifts, groans, buckles. It makes its own rules. And you wonder, not for the first time, if the Arctic is laughing at you. A slow, ancient laugh buried deep beneath the ice. Your boots crunch forward, each step a stubborn act of defiance against the cold, and the sound echoes in your ears. Sharp, brittle like cracking glass. The pressure ridge rises beside you, a frozen cliff face stretching toward a sky that's still the same relentless gray. The wind has calmed for the moment, but the cold? The cold is always there, pressing in, a silent weight against your chest, your fingers, the tips of your ears. You flex your hands in your mittens, trying to remember what warmth used to feel like. The dogs, you notice, have settled into a tight, huddled ball. Their breath curls up in tiny clouds, tails tucked under their noses, eyes half-lidded but watchful. They know something you don't, something you're starting to suspect, but can't quite admit to yourself yet. The Arctic isn't just a place. It's a slow, inevitable pull, like gravity for your soul. It doesn't fight you, not really. It just waits. It waits for you to stop moving, to slow down, to give in, and when you do, well, the snow is always hungry for one more body. You keep moving because that's the only choice you have. Your stomach growls, sharp and hollow, and you think about food, or rather, the lack of it. You remember the stories of the explorers' rations. Salted meat, ship's biscuit, tinned soup thick with mystery ingredients. And then, of course, there's pemmican, an old-school superfood made of ground meat, bearable fat, and berries, a recipe borrowed from indigenous peoples. It was dense, greasy, and tasted, by all accounts, like, well, survival, which is to say, not great, but better than nothing. But when the pemmican ran out, when the biscuits were gone, when even the weevils had been picked out of the flour, that's when things got grim. You've probably heard the whispers, how some expeditions, trapped for months or years, turn to the unthinkable. You pause for a moment, the snow crunching softly beneath you, and think about those grim tales. Men, hollow-eyed and starving, staring at each other across a cold tent, wondering who might fall asleep and not wake up. Who might become dinner. It's a dark thought, and you shiver, pulling your coat tighter, even though it doesn't help. Historians still argue about whether those stories were true, or just the fevered imaginings of a desperate few. There are no neat answers in the Arctic, just the endless ice, the biting cold, and the quiet, gnawing knowledge that you might be next. You keep your eyes on the horizon, where the sky and snow blur together in an endless smudge of white and gray, and then a flicker of movement catches your eye. A fluttering scrap of fabric, half buried in a drift. You stagger toward it, boots sinking, heart hammering in your chest. It's a flag. Faded, torn, the colors barely visible. A remnant of some long-forgotten expedition, maybe, or a signal left behind by a desperate soul. You brush snow from the fabric, fingers stiff and clumsy, and wonder, what story did this flag witness? Whose hands planted it here? Did they survive? Did they ever have a chance? The wind sighs through the pressure ridges, a low, steady hum that feels almost like a voice. And you think of the people who came before you. Franklin, Ross, Kane, Nansen, all those names etched into history. They were bold, yes, brave, maybe, but also stubborn, sometimes foolish. They brought European boots into a land that didn't care about their titles or their fancy uniforms. They brought optimism, maps that said, "Here be the passage," and enough tea to throw a royal garden party. But they didn't bring the knowledge of the people who had lived here for centuries, the Inuit, who knew how to read the snow, how to hunt, how to live. The explorers thought they could bend the Arctic to their will. The Arctic, of course, had other ideas. You sigh, a deep, rattling breath that fogs in the air, and you remember a little-known fact. Did you know that some Arctic explorers tried to keep journals with ink that froze solid? They dipped their pens into a pot of ink, only to find it had turned into a block of ice. Imagine that, trying to write your last thoughts while the ink itself refuses to flow. And yet, some of them did. They scrawled their final words in cramped, frozen letters, trying to leave a record behind, even as their own fingers stiffened and cracked. The cold has sunk so deep now that you're not sure where your body ends and the ice begins. You move because you have to, but each step feels like a decision. The dogs watch you, their eyes glinting in the faint, gray light, and you wonder if they're waiting for you to figure out the same thing they already know. This isn't your world. You're just a visitor here, passing through. The ice groans beneath your feet, a deep, resonant sound that hums through your boots, through your bones, and for a moment, you feel very small, very temporary, like a snowflake landing on a glacier. Beautiful, maybe, but gone in an instant. And as you press on, the cold biting at your face, you wonder, not for the first time, if the Arctic ever really lets anyone leave. The wind rises again, steady and sharp, like 1,000 tiny needles brushing against your cheeks. You hunch your shoulders, pressing your chin into your scarf, but the cold finds its way in, slipping down the back of your neck, nipping at the edges of your gloves. Your breath rasps in your throat, raw and metallic, and you think, not for the first time, this is what it feels like to be slowly erased. Your tracks, your warmth, even the sound of your own heartbeat. Out here, they all just fade. You glance back at the dogs, still huddled together, their eyes half closed, their fur ruffling in the wind. They're conserving energy, saving themselves for the next haul, the next impossible stretch across the ice. Smart creatures. You try to remember the last time you sat still like that, truly still. It's been hours, days maybe. Time is slippery here, trying to hold a snowflake in your palm. The cold eats the hours, the light shifts in strange ways, and the minutes stretch out long and thin, like the last scrapings of a candle's wick. Your boots scrape against something hard, something that clinks. You pause, brushing snow away, and find it. A battered tin can, edges rusted, a faint dent along the side. You pick it up, turn it over in your hands, and wonder who dropped it. Someone with frostbitten fingers, probably. Someone who had a name, a family, a life back home. Someone who thought this can of soup, or meat, or whatever it held, might be the thing that kept them going a little longer. You shake it, and there's no sound, long since empty. Just another piece of history buried in the snow. You think of the tinned food disasters of the 19th century expeditions, how the Franklin crew, for instance, had their food sealed in lead-soldered tins, which, of course, slowly poisoned them. Good job, Victorian science. And the worst part? They didn't even know. They thought they were eating safely, methodically, rationing out their little tins of preserved meat while the lead seeped into their bodies, making them weak, confused, their joints aching, their minds foggy. It's like packing a time bomb in your lunchbox. And here you are, holding the echo of one of those cans, the silent witness to a slow, invisible death. The wind shifts, and you swear you catch a whiff of something. Sharp, sour, like old grease mixed with salt. You wrinkle your nose, and then it hits you. Pemmican. That dense, greasy block of fat and meat that explorers used to rely on. You remember reading how some expeditions rationed it so strictly that men would chew on the same piece for hours, gnawing it like a dog with a bone, just trying to keep hunger at bay. And here's a quirky little fact for you. Some explorers flavored their pemmican with raisins or currants, because why not make your survival food a little fancy? Not that it helped much. After weeks on end, it still tasted like sadness and desperation. Your stomach growls and you feel a pang of sympathy for those long-ago souls. They were just like you, tired, hungry, probably wondering how they'd gotten themselves into this frozen mess. And they, like you, probably looked out over the endless snow and wondered if they'd ever see a tree again, or hear birdsong, or feel the sun on their faces without the bite of frost. You trudge on, the snow crunching underfoot, and think about another odd little detail. Some explorers packed luxury items on these trips. Fine china, silverware, a library of books. One expedition even brought a hand-cranked organ so they could play hymns in the middle of the Arctic. Imagine that. Your hands blackened with frostbite, your belly aching with hunger, and someone's over there playing nearer. My God, to thee on a wheezing old organ. It's absurd. It's human. It's kind of beautiful, in a tragic, foolish sort of way. You pause for a moment, letting the wind tug at your coat, and glance up at the sky. The clouds are thin now, and you can see the faint shimmer of stars. Just a few, twinkling coldly in the endless black. And you think about how, for some explorers, the stars were the only guide they had. No GPS, no satellite maps, just the constellations, the flickering of the aurora, and the quiet, steady hum of the earth beneath their feet. You breathe in, slowly, the air sharp as glass, and you think, maybe they weren't so different from you. Stubborn, curious, a little reckless, and just trying to make it through another night without becoming part of the snow. The dogs stir, one letting out a low, sleepy whine, and you realize it's time to move. You take a step, and the snow groans beneath you, a low, unsettling sound that feels like a reminder. The ice is always moving, always watching. And as you press on, boots crunching, heart pounding, you can't help but wonder, how many more steps can you take before the Arctic decides it's had enough of you? The stars overhead seem to glimmer with a kind of cold indifference, tiny, sharp pinpricks in a vast, dark sky. You pause for a moment, tilting your head back, and feel the weight of it all pressing down on you. The stars don't care. The ice doesn't care. The wind, the cold, the endless snow. None of it cares. Out here, it's just you, the dogs, and the slow, grinding hum of survival. Your breath rasps in your throat, catching on the dry, cracked skin at the corners of your mouth. Your lips feel like paper, thin, brittle, ready to tear. You lick them instinctively, but it only makes the sting worse. The cold has a way of turning even the smallest discomforts into gnawing, constant pains. A blister becomes a festering wound. A bit of damp wool turns into frostbite. You flex your toes, trying to coax some warmth back into them, but they feel distant, like they belong to someone else. And then, as if the universe wanted to throw in a little cosmic humor, it starts to snow. Not the light, fluffy kind that makes you want to sip hot cocoa by a fire, but the sharp, biting kind. Tiny pellets that sting your skin, each one a reminder that the Arctic doesn't do cozy. It does relentless. You hunch your shoulders, pulling your scarf higher, and keep moving, the snow swirling around you like a fog made of ice. Your boots crunch through a drift, and you nearly stumble over something hard, an old wooden crate, half buried and splintered. You brush at it, revealing faded lettering. Lime juice, 1853. You blink. Lime juice? Out here. And then you remember. Scurvy. The great hidden enemy of every Arctic expedition. Without vitamin C, your body slowly turns against itself. Gums bleeding, teeth loosening, joints aching, skin bruising at the slightest touch. It's a slow, humiliating kind of death, and it took down more men than polar bears or freezing winds ever did. You smirk, a bitter little twist of your lips, and think they knew about scurvy. They packed lime juice, citrus, whatever they could get their hands on. But storage was tricky. Freezing temperatures, leaky barrels, and, of course, good old human error. Sometimes the juice spoiled. Sometimes it was forgotten at the bottom of a crate. And sometimes, well, sometimes the crew just didn't drink it. There's an old story about an expedition where the lime juice froze into a solid block, and the men chipped away at it like ice. Imagine trying to save yourself from scurvy with a lime-flavored popsicle the size of a boulder. You keep walking, the crate disappearing behind you, and think about how scurvy wasn't just a disease. It was a slow unraveling of the body. Explorers would feel fine until they weren't. A small bruise would bloom into something dark and ugly. Teeth would loosen and fall out with a gentle tug. Wounds wouldn't heal. And the worst part? They often didn't know why. Historians still debate some of the finer details, of course. Whether it was just scurvy, or if lead poisoning, starvation, and sheer mental exhaustion all played their part. The Arctic has a way of blurring the lines, of making every cause of death feel like a team effort. The snow thickens now, falling in a steady, relentless curtain that muffles the world. Your visibility shrinks to just a few feet, the rest swallowed up by white. It's like walking inside a cloud, except this cloud is cold enough to freeze your tears before they can fall. You squint into the snow, and for a moment you think you see something. Shapes, figures moving. You blink, rub your eyes, and they're gone. Just snow. Just the tricks your mind plays when the cold has seeped in too deep. You press on, feeling the weight of the snow on your shoulders, the sting of it against your face, and you think absurdly about sunscreen. Did you know Arctic explorers sometimes rubbed fish oil on their skin as a kind of primitive sunscreen? Fish oil? The smell alone would probably clear a room, but hey, it worked. Sort of. It helped protect against the sun's reflection off the snow, the blinding glare that could burn your skin raw even in the middle of an ice field. Arctic sunburns. Now that's a fun little surprise. You'd think all this snow would make it safe, but no. The sun still finds a way to scorch you when you least expect it. You chuckle softly, the sound hollow in the whiteout. The cold has a strange sense of humor. Sunburn in the snow, scurvy in a land of ice, hunger in a world where the animals have more fat reserves than you'll ever see in your lifetime. The dogs stir behind you, letting out low, uneasy whines, and you realize the snow is falling harder now, the wind picking up in a sharp, insistent whisper. You wrap your arms around yourself, hunching lower, and think, just a little farther. That's what they always thought, isn't it? Just a little farther. Just over the next ridge. Just past the next pressure ridge. Just a little farther. And out here, that's the danger. You tell yourself you'll stop soon, rest soon, eat soon. But the Arctic doesn't care about your plans. It doesn't care about your hunger, or your scurvy, or the fact that you're one cracked step away from vanishing into the ice. It just waits. The snow slows, thinning to a gentle flurry, but the wind remains hissing through the gaps in your scarf, seeping into your sleeves, tugging at the edges of your sanity. You keep moving because what else is there to do? Every step is an act of stubbornness now, a small, quiet refusal to become part of the ice. Your boots crunch through a thin crust of frost, the sound sharp and brittle, like breaking bones. Your hands have gone from numb to something worse, a kind of burning cold that makes your fingers feel stiff, like they've been dipped in wax and left to harden. You flex them, slowly, and wonder if this is how it starts. The stories say it does. First the numbness, then the color drains, then the flesh turns hard and black, and after that, well, they used to call it the Arctic pinch. A little frostbite souvenir to take home, if you made it back at all. The dogs let out a low, restless growl, and you turn sharply, squinting into the snow. There, in the distance, just a flicker, a shadow, something moving. Your breath catches in your throat. You wait, listening, heart thudding. It's hard to tell what's real out here, what's a shape, and what's just your tired brain trying to make sense of the swirling white. The wind whistles between the pressure ridges, and for a moment you swear it sounds like voices. Low, murmuring, half lost on the wind. You shiver, and it's not just from the cold. You think about how the cold plays tricks on the mind. There's an old story, whether it's true or just Arctic legend, who knows, about a group of explorers who became convinced they were being followed by a third man. They saw footprints in the snow, felt a presence just behind them, heard whispers on the wind. Some said it was a guardian spirit, others thought it was the beginning of madness, a symptom of exhaustion, starvation, and the slow creep of frostbite into the brain. Either way, it was a reminder. Out here, the mind is just as fragile as the body. You shake your head, blink hard, and press on. The snow underfoot feels softer now, more like powder than ice, and you know that's not a good sign. Powder means drifts, and drifts mean hidden crevasses. You step carefully, testing each footfall, your breath rasping loud in the stillness. And then you see it, half buried in the snow, a rusted iron pot, the kind you'd use over an open fire. You squat down, brush the snow away, and it clangs against something hard. A cache. Someone left supplies here, probably decades ago. You open the lid, your fingers clumsy and shaking. And inside, a lump of frozen meat, gray and solid as stone. You stare at it, a strange mix of gratitude and disgust curling in your stomach. It's food, technically, but also a reminder that this land doesn't forgive. Someone left this here, hoping they'd return. Did they? Or is this just another silent marker, a frozen whisper of hope that never thawed? You glance at the dogs who watch you with tired, knowing eyes. They understand, in a way you never will. You look back at the pot, and here's a strange little fact to chew on. Some expeditions, desperate for fuel, burn the wood from their own sleds, even the resin-soaked canvas meant for tents. They'd burn anything, gear, crates, even the books they brought to keep their minds occupied. Imagine that. Sitting in a dark tent, tossing a leather-bound copy of Paradise Lost into the stove, watching Milton's words curl into smoke while your own fingers stiffen into claws. You laugh softly, the sound dry and cracked, and it echoes weirdly in the snow. Maybe it's the altitude, maybe it's the cold, maybe it's just you. You feel a little lightheaded, like your brain is floating a few inches above your body, looking down at you with mild curiosity. You wonder how long it takes for hypothermia to really set in. They say it starts with shivering, then a strange, warm flush, then confusion. You're supposed to feel sleepy, they say, like you could just lie down and let the snow cover you, soft and slow. You glance at the drift beside you, the way it curves gently, and you feel the weight of it, the strange, almost seductive pull of rest. The dogs stir, tails thumping lightly, and you blink hard, shaking your head. No, not yet. Not here. You force yourself to stand, muscles aching, knees locking, and you take a step. Another, and another. The snow crunches beneath you, steady and rhythmic, and you focus on that sound, the simple, honest noise of survival. And as you walk, you remember another strange fact. Did you know some explorers carried little flags or banners just so they could mark their route? Tiny symbols of progress in an ocean of white? Some even embroidered their flags by hand, carefully stitching initials or expedition crests, a flash of color against the ice. It feels almost absurd, doesn't it? A delicate thread in the middle of this frozen, merciless place. But maybe that's the point. A small act of defiance, a human fingerprint in a land that erases all footprints. You keep moving, boots crunching, breath fogging, and you wonder, quietly, bitterly, how many of those flags are still out here, buried under the snow, waiting for someone, anyone, to find them again. The snow drifts higher now, curling into soft, deceptive hills that hide the treacherous ridges underneath. You move slower, each step sinking deeper, each breath a little more ragged. The cold clings to your skin like a second layer, no longer biting, but seeping, slow and heavy, as if it's sinking into your bones, whispering, "Just stop." You won't even feel it. You'll just sleep. But you keep moving, boots crunching, body swaying with each step, and you start to feel strange. There's a warmth blooming in your chest, a softness in your limbs that feels almost pleasant. You blink slowly, and it's like the snow is glowing, soft, inviting. You remember reading somewhere that hypothermia does that. It tricks you. Your body stops shivering, your blood vessels dilate, and for a moment you feel warm. It's called paradoxical undressing, when the freezing body thinks it's too hot and sheds layers in a final, fatal mistake. You tighten your coat, fingers fumbling at the stiff, ice-encrusted buttons, and mutter to yourself, "Not today." The dogs let out a soft whine, almost like they're agreeing, their noses twitching in the air. They know. They always know. You push forward, and the world seems to narrow to the crunch of your boots, the rasp of your breath, the slow, rhythmic thud of your heart. And then, just as you think the snow will swallow you whole, you spot something. A dark shape, low to the ground, hunched and heavy. You blink, squinting, and realize it's a sledge, abandoned, half-buried, ropes trailing off into the snow like frozen snakes. You stagger toward it, and as you get closer, you see what's lashed to it. Bundles wrapped in canvas, ice crusted thick around the edges. You brush the snow away, and your breath catches in your throat. It's supplies, crates of tinned food, coils of rope, a battered kettle, and something else, a stack of books, edges warped with frost. You pick one up, and the pages crackle, stuck together in a block of ice. The title, barely visible, a treatise on Arctic navigation. You laugh softly, a dry, rasping sound, and shake your head. Helpful, you think. Maybe a little too late. You glance at the dogs, who are watching you with their quiet, patient eyes. One of them, a shaggy black and white, stretches, nose brushing the snow, and gives a little huff, as if to say, "Well, are you going to open it?" You pry the lid off one of the crates, your fingers stiff and clumsy, and inside, biscuits. Ship's biscuit, hard as rock, speckled with little black dots that you hope are just bits of flour and not something else. You remember a story about how explorers would tap their biscuits on the table to shake out the weevils. Protein, they'd say, with a grin that didn't quite reach their eyes. You break off a corner, gnaw on it. It tastes like chalk and regret. You sit for a moment, hunched over the crate, feeling the wind curl around you like a cat. Soft, insistent, waiting for you to close your eyes. You think about how those explorers, so many of them, never made it back. They left behind sledges like this, scattered across the ice like breadcrumbs for history to follow. Some were found decades later, perfectly preserved, the biscuits still in their tins, the books still legible, the boots still lined up by the tent flap, as if someone might return at any moment. It's eerie, isn't it? How the cold holds on to things, keeping them waiting, like a museum where the curator is the wind, and the exhibits are stories of survival and failure and hope that got a little too far ahead of itself. You brush a layer of frost off the crate, and here's a little odd fact for you. Did you know some explorers believed the cold could preserve not just bodies but souls? They thought that maybe, just maybe, the Arctic was a kind of frozen purgatory, holding on to the spirits of the lost until they could be set free. It's a strange, lingering superstition, one of those whispers that cling to places like this, where the sky stretches forever and the ice never lets go. You sigh, a long, slow breath that fogs in the air, and you feel the weight of it all pressing down on you. The history, the silence, the knowledge that you're just one more set of footprints in a long, long trail of people who thought they could outlast the cold. You stand, legs trembling, and take a step forward. The dogs rise too, their tails wagging once, then settling into a quiet, watchful stillness. The snow drifts higher, the wind hums a low, steady tune, and somewhere out there, just beyond the edge of your vision, the Arctic waits. And you wonder, how long do you have before the cold finally wins? The wind hums low, steady, a sound that feels less like a breeze and more like the Arctic breathing. Slow, deep, ancient. You keep walking, boots sinking into snow that feels softer now, almost like powder drifting over the ice. It's beautiful in a way, but also dangerous. Powder snow hides cracks, crevasses, and thin patches of ice that could swallow you whole. Before you have time to shout, your legs ache, each step a little slower, a little heavier. The dogs trot behind you, their paws padding silently, their breaths puffing small clouds into the air. They're tired too. You can see it in the way they move, the way their ears droop, the way their tails drag behind them like old flags. Still, they keep going. It's what they do. You take a cue from them and press on, even though your body is starting to feel less like a part of you, and more like a bundle of numb, aching parts loosely stitched together. And then, as you crest a small ridge, you see it, faint at first, then clearer as you squint into the gray light. A line of footprints, half filled with snow, stretching ahead like a faint path through the whiteness. You stop, blinking, your breath catching in your throat. Someone was here. Someone else. You follow the tracks, your steps matching theirs, each print like a ghostly reminder that you're not the first to walk this way, and you won't be the last. Your boots crunch into one of the prints, and you remember a strange little fact. Arctic explorers sometimes left messages in tin cans, tucked under cairns or stones, hoping someone would find them, years later maybe, like a frozen message in a bottle. They'd scratch out coordinates, updates, sometimes even desperate pleas for rescue. And sometimes, those messages were found, buried under layers of ice. A final note from a man who never made it home. You look around, half expecting to see a cairn, a stack of stones, something to mark the path. But there's nothing, just snow. Just the wind. Just the faint, fading footprints that stretch ahead and vanish into the swirling white. You keep moving, and as you do, you think about another grim little detail. When men fell ill or weak on these journeys, they were sometimes left behind, literally. Too slow, too sick, too much of a burden. They'd be wrapped in blankets, given on a biscuit or two, and left to wait, alone, while the expedition trudged on. The logic was brutal. One man's survival over another's. And sometimes those men did make it. Crawling back to camp days later, half frozen, half starved, but alive. Other times, well, you can guess. You shiver, the cold settling deeper now, like a second skin. Your mind drifts, sluggish and foggy, and you find yourself thinking about the food again. Always the food. You remember reading about an expedition that tried to survive on boiled leather and seal blubber stew. They'd chew on the leather for hours, soaking it in broth until it softened, trying to convince themselves it was nourishment. And sometimes it worked, at least for a little while. But hunger has a way of gnawing through hope, doesn't it? And then, just as your stomach twists with the thought, you see it. A skeleton. Just a glimpse at first. White bones tangled in faded, tattered fabric, half covered by snow. A rib cage, stark against the ice. A femur poking out like a broken mast from a sunken ship. You stop, your breath shallow, your hands trembling inside your mittens. The dogs whine softly, tails low, as if they can sense the weight of it. The skeleton lies curled, as if in sleep, the remains of a blanket still wrapped around the shoulders. A scrap of cloth flutters in the wind. Faded red, maybe once part of a uniform. You crouch beside it, and the snow cold against your knees, and you wonder, who were they? What were they thinking in those final moments? Did they believe help was coming? Did they imagine the snow would melt, that spring would arrive, that a ship would crest the horizon with rescue on board? The wind sighs again, and you find yourself whispering an apology. Not to the bones exactly, but to the past. To the men who thought they could outlast this place, who thought courage and determination were enough. And maybe in some ways they were. Maybe there's a kind of victory in just trying, even when the odds are impossible. You stand, your knees creaking, and brush the snow from your coat. The dogs press close, their bodies warm against your legs, a reminder that you're still here, still breathing, still moving. You take a deep breath, and the cold stings your lungs like a sharp intake of ice water. And as you step away from the bones, your boots crunching softly in the snow, you wonder, how many more skeletons are out here, hidden beneath the drifts, waiting for the wind to uncover them again? How many stories, half told, half forgotten, still lie frozen in the ice? You take a step, then another, the snow giving way beneath your boots in a soft, muffled crunch that seems almost too gentle for this place. The cold is a weight now, not sharp, but heavy, like an iron blanket draped over your shoulders, slowing your limbs, fogging your thoughts. You glance down at your hands, barely visible inside your mittens, and wonder if you'd even notice if the frostbite crept in. Would it hurt? Or would it just feel quiet? The dogs move ahead, their bodies low and steady, their breath huffing into the air in soft clouds. They're machines, in a way, living engines of fur and muscle, bred for this, built for it. You envy them, a little. They don't question. They don't think about what it means to be out here. They just go. The sky is a pale, sickly gray now, the kind that doesn't promise warmth or light, just more of the same. The horizon blurs into the snow, and you realize, again, that you could be walking in circles for hours and never know it. You think of the explorers who did exactly that. Men who, in the blinding white of an Arctic storm, wandered in endless loops until they collapsed from exhaustion, their bodies curling into the snow, their last breaths swallowed by the wind. You pause, rubbing your hands together, and think about a strange little fact you once read. Some explorers, in their desperation, tried to warm themselves by eating snow. Just a few mouthfuls, they thought, just enough to soothe the dry crackle in their throats. But snow, of course, is cold, so cold that your body has to burn precious energy just to melt it. They were, in effect, freezing themselves from the inside out. It's the kind of mistake you don't make twice, if you survive the first time at all. The dogs slow, ears pricking, and you follow their gaze. Ahead, a dark shape rises from the snow, a tent, or what's left of one. The canvas is tattered, flapping weakly in the wind, the poles half collapsed, the edges crusted with ice. You approach slowly, heart thudding in your chest, and as you get closer you see the shapes inside. Bundles of supplies, maybe. Or... no. It's a body. Wrapped tight in a fur-lined coat, hood drawn up, face half hidden beneath a scarf stiff with frost. You can't tell if it's a man or a woman, or even how long they've been here. A month? A year? A century? Time doesn't work the same out here. The cold preserves. The ice keeps secrets. You crouch, breath catching, and notice the hands. Gloved, stiff, fingers curled around a small metal object. A compass. The needle frozen, locked in place, pointing nowhere. Or maybe everywhere. It's a sad little irony, isn't it? All the technology in the world, all the maps, the charts, the compasses, and still, the Arctic swallowed them whole. Explorers thought they could measure and map and tame this place. But they didn't understand that the Arctic doesn't follow rules. It makes its own. You stand slowly, joints stiff, and glance at the dogs. They're watching you, eyes calm and steady, as if to say, move on. You take a step back, boots crunching, and the tent flutters again, a soft, sighing sound that feels like a goodbye. And then you remember another curious fact, one that feels almost too absurd to be true. Did you know some expeditions packed fireworks? Fireworks? They thought they could use them as signals, bright flares of light to pierce the endless dark. And, in theory, it made sense. Fire to call for help. But out here, in the bitter cold, the powder sometimes froze. The wicks snapped. The fireworks fizzled, useless in the deep Arctic night. It's a strange image, isn't it? A man standing on the ice, shivering, holding a sparkler to the sky, hoping for rescue that never came. You sang a long, fogging breath, and feel the cold tighten around your ribs, a band that won't loosen. The dogs turn, paws crunching in the snow, and you follow, because what else can you do? You move forward, boots dragging, mind slipping into that strange, hollow place where you stop thinking in words and just exist. The Arctic wants you quiet. The Arctic wants you slow. And somewhere in the back of your mind you wonder, when they found the Franklin ships, long after the men were gone, the ships locked in the ice like bones in a frozen grave, did they find any signs of a final, desperate attempt to signal for help? A torn scrap of cloth, a flare, a message carved into the wood? Or were the ships just still, silent? A testament to the fact that sometimes, no matter how hard you try, the Arctic always wins. You keep moving, the snow swirling around you, the dogs pressing forward, the wind whispering soft and low, like it's telling you a story you'll never fully understand. Your steps feel slower now, heavier, like the snow is trying to hold you back. The cold has worked its way into your bones, not sharp anymore, but dull, persistent, like a low hum in the background of your mind. Your breath fogs the air in front of you, and each inhale burns a little, as if the cold itself has teeth. The dogs press on, steady, their bodies hunkered low, moving like they've done this 100 times before. Maybe they have. You look up, squinting against the pale gray light, and for a moment, it feels like you're walking inside a snow globe, silent, swirling, endless. The horizon blurs into the sky, and you lose track of where the land ends and the sky begins. It's disorienting, and for a second you think you see shapes moving in the distance, people maybe, or shadows. But when you blink, they're gone, swallowed by the white. Just your mind playing tricks again, or maybe something else. You pause, resting your hands on your knees, and think about another strange little detail from the old expeditions. The phenomenon of Arctic mirages, or fata morgana. It's a trick of the light. Layers of warm and cold air bending the horizon, making things appear where they aren't. A ship floating in the sky. A mountain where there's only flat sea ice. A phantom coastline just out of reach. You wonder how many explorers trudge toward a shimmering mirage, convinced they were saved, only to find themselves chasing a ghost. Hope is a dangerous thing in the Arctic. It can pull you forward when your body is ready to stop, but sometimes that hope is just a lie, refracted and shimmering in the cold air. You stand, shoulders stiff, and keep moving. The snow crunches beneath your boots in a rhythm that feels almost hypnotic. Step, crunch, breath, step, crunch, breath. You focus on that sound, that pattern, and for a while, it's the only thing that keeps you tethered to yourself. And then you see it, something that doesn't belong, a black, jagged shape against the endless white. You blink, heart quickening, and as you approach, it resolves into something unexpected. A stove. An old battered cast iron stove, half buried in a drift, the legs poking up like the ribs of a long-dead animal. You stare at it, baffled. Out here, in the middle of nowhere. And then you remember. Some expeditions dragged stoves with them, hoping to melt ice for water, to cook meager meals, to keep a little warmth alive in the endless cold. They hauled them across the ice, heavy and awkward, fueled by dwindling supplies of coal or blubber or whatever they could scrounge. Imagine the desperation, spending precious energy to haul a hunk of iron across a frozen wasteland just for the promise of a warm meal. You run a hand over the stove's surface. It's cold now, of course. Cold as the air. Cold as the bones of the men who once sat around it, their hands outstretched, faces hollowed by hunger. And you wonder, did they manage to light it? Did they sit around it, the orange glow flickering on their frostbitten faces, trying to pretend they were somewhere else, somewhere warmer? Or did it sputter and die, leaving them in the dark, huddled close, listening to the wind howl around them like the Arctic itself was laughing? The dogs stir, sniffing at the stove, and you take a step back. The cold presses closer now, a steady, insistent weight, and you feel the edges of your mind starting to fray. Your thoughts drift, half-formed, slippery. You think about how some explorers, in their last desperate days, reported strange symptoms, vivid dreams, hallucinations, a creeping sense of warmth that wasn't real. Some lay down in the snow, convinced they were home. Others claimed to see strange lights in the sky, ghostly figures, maybe, or flickering shapes that danced above the ice. Historians still debate whether these visions were caused by scurvy, lead poisoning, or the sheer exhaustion of the mind under extreme cold. Some say they were just hallucinations. Others wonder if the Arctic itself has a kind of quiet magic, a way of pulling you in, holding you tight, and whispering in your ear. Stay. Rest. Let it all drift away. You shake your head, trying to clear the fog, and take a step back from the stove. The dogs look up at you, eyes bright, waiting. You take another breath, sharp and icy, and it stings your lungs like a mouthful of needles. And you wonder, not for the first time, how many men stopped at a stove like this, hoping for a little warmth, a little comfort, and never got back up again. You press on, boots crunching, the wind sighing around you, and the Arctic watching, always watching, quiet and patient. Your breath rasps in your throat, dry and shallow, as if the cold itself is trying to steal the air from your lungs. Each step feels heavier, your boots dragging, your legs leaden. The snow clings to your boots in sticky clumps, making each movement a small battle. You glance at the dogs. They move slower too, their fur rimmed with frost, their breath puffing in quiet, steady clouds. They're tired, but they don't stop. Neither do you. The wind hums a low, steady tune, almost like a lullaby, if lullabies were written by an uncaring ancient force that never sleeps. It's a sound that feels like it could go on forever. And maybe it does. Out here, time stretches thin, like taffy pulled too far, like the days themselves have forgotten how to end. The sun, when it shows at all, hangs low and pale in the sky, barely more than a smudge of light. The Arctic doesn't do sunrise and sunset the way you know them. It just is. A quiet, gray eternity. You press on, boots crunching, and your eyes catch on something strange in the snow. A glint, a flicker of color. You stop, kneeling slowly, your knees cracking as you lower yourself down. And there it is, a piece of cloth. Red, tattered, half buried in the snow. A flag, maybe, or a bit of a scarf, or even a signal rag left behind by some long-gone expedition. You pull it free, the fabric stiff with frost, and feel a strange pang of something. Hope, pity, a connection to someone you'll never know. You tuck the scrap into your pocket without really thinking. A small, quiet act of remembrance. And here's a quirky little fact to keep you company. Did you know that some explorers would write their names on scraps of paper or bits of fabric and tuck them into the walls of their tents? It was a way of saying, I was here. A message for anyone who might come along after. A whisper across time. You wonder how many of those names are still out there, frozen in the ice, waiting for someone to find them. The dogs shift, sniffing at the snow, and you move on. The cold is deeper now, not just on your skin, but inside you, settled into your chest, your bones, the slow rhythm of your heart. You try to remember how long you've been walking, but the hours blur. You think of another grim little detail. In the final stages of hypothermia, people often feel warm. So warm, in fact, that they start to strip off their clothes, convinced they're overheating. It's called paradoxical undressing, and it's a trick the cold plays on the brain, one last cruel joke before it takes you. You glance down at your gloves, flex your fingers. They still move, though slower, stiffer than before. The dogs nudge forward, tails low, ears twitching, as if they can sense the danger creeping closer. And then, in the distance, you see it. The faint outline of a ship. Or at least, that's what your tired, snow-blurred eyes tell you. You blink, squinting, trying to focus. It's a mirage, you're sure of it. A fata morgana, those strange floating images that shimmer in the Arctic air, bending reality like heat waves on a summer road. But you can't help it. You move toward it anyway, steps slow, each one feeling like it takes a lifetime. The shape resolves, sharpens, and you feel a flicker of hope. And then, just as quickly, it vanishes. Gone. Just snow. Just the empty, endless white. You stop, breath heaving, the cold seeping deeper, and you think about how many men saw mirages like that. Ships, land, rescue, just before they collapsed. Hope is a powerful thing. It can keep you going, or it can break you. You turn slowly, scanning the horizon, but there's nothing. Just snow, ice, sky. The dogs are watching you, quiet, patient. You wonder if they know, really know, how small you are out here, How fragile. Maybe they've always known. The wind picks up again, swirling snow around your feet, and you think about another strange, forgotten story. How some explorers, desperate for warmth, tried to sleep inside their sleds, curling up among the crates and supplies. It was warmer, sure, sheltered from the wind, but it wasn't safe. The weight of the snow could collapse a sled in minutes, burying a man alive. A cruel irony, isn't it? That the very thing you think will save you might be the thing that seals you in for good. You take another step, then another. Your boots crunch in the snow, the dogs plod on, the wind hums its low, steady tune. And you wonder, not for the first time, how long you can keep going before the Arctic decides it's your turn to stop. The snow feels softer now, deceptively so. Your boots sink deeper with each step, and the effort of lifting your legs, of pulling your feet free, feels monumental, like you're wading through cold syrup that's thickening with every breath. Your arms hang heavy at your sides, your fingers clumsy and uncooperative inside your mittens. Even your breath, that simple, automatic thing, feels like a chore. Each inhale a shallow, rasping tug, each exhale curling into the air and fading too quickly. Like you're exhaling the last scraps of your energy. The dogs plod on, slower now, their paws sinking into the drifts, tails low, ears flat against the cold. They're tired too. They don't look at you, but you feel their presence. A quiet, loyal persistence that keeps you tethered to this frozen world, as if they're saying, "Come on, just a little farther." You focus on that, a little farther. It's the thought that's carried so many explorers, isn't it? Just one more mile, just past that next ridge, just one more step. And you think about the men who came before you, those ghostly names written in old journals, their stories half told and half forgotten. The ones who tried to map the Arctic by sheer willpower, by dragging their ships into the ice, by hauling sledges packed with china sets and brass instruments and crates of tinned meat they didn't know would poison them. And you think, too, about the little things they brought, tokens of home, a pipe, a pocket watch, a locket with a faded portrait inside. There's something heartbreakingly human about it, isn't there? To carry a reminder of the world you left behind, even as the cold gnaws at your bones and the wind erases your footprints. It's like a quiet act of defiance, a whisper. I was here. I mattered. Your foot catches on something hard beneath the snow, and you stumble, catching yourself just in time. You kneel, brushing at the drift, and reveal a spoon. Just a simple, battered spoon, its surface tarnished, the handle bent. You turn it over in your hands, your breath fogging the metal, and you wonder who last held it. Did they sit by a flickering lamp, scooping out the last of a thin, bitter stew, their hands shaking from the cold? Did they tuck it into their pocket for the next meal that never came? Or did they drop it here, lost to the snow, forgotten like so many other things in this place? You slip the spoon into your own pocket, a quiet, unspoken promise. Maybe it's a small thing, but it's something. The wind picks up again, stronger now, slicing across your face, tugging at your coat, howling low and steady like an ancient, endless sigh. The snow blows sideways, stinging your cheeks, and you hunch your shoulders, pressing forward into it, because stopping feels like a worse idea. The cold whispers to you, soft and sly, like a voice you almost recognize. Just lie down. Just for a moment. Just rest. But you don't. Not yet. And here's an odd little detail to distract yourself with. Did you know some explorers believed the Arctic air itself could cure diseases? They thought the cold, crisp air would cleanse the body, sharpen the mind, heal what ailed them. Some even set up makeshift hospitals on the ice, convinced that the air was a kind of natural medicine. Of course, they also thought a good dose of brandy would cure frostbite. It didn't. But they tried, in that stubborn, hopeful, doomed way explorers always do. Your hands tremble as you adjust your scarf, the fabric stiff and rimmed with frost. You glance down at the dogs. They're watching you now, quiet and steady, their eyes reflecting the faint gray light. They know. You know. The Arctic is patient. It waits. And it wins. You press on, boots dragging, breath rasping, the wind wrapping around you like a cold, heavy blanket. You wonder, almost absently, if this is what the last days of the Franklin expedition felt like. Not a dramatic, sudden end, but a slow, quiet fading. Steps growing heavier, breath growing shallower. The cold creeping in, not as an enemy, but as an inevitable companion. You take another step, and another. The dogs follow, their paws leaving faint impressions in the snow that the wind starts erasing as soon as they're made. And you wonder, how many more steps do you have left before the Arctic decides, enough? The wind has quieted now, a low, steady whisper that barely stirs the air. The snow, too, seems to have settled, falling soft and slow like ash from some distant, invisible fire. You move forward, step by step, each movement a small, quiet rebellion against the cold that seeps deeper with every breath. Your legs feel like they belong to someone else, numb, heavy, sluggish. Your fingers barely move inside your mittens. Your face is stiff, the skin raw and stinging. But you keep going. Because that's what you do out here. You keep going, until you don't. The dogs pad beside you, their tails low, their fur rimmed with frost. They don't whine, don't complain, don't ask questions. They just move, steady, quiet, endlessly forward. You envy them, in a way. Their simple, stubborn focus. Their understanding of this place in a way you never could. They know how to survive. You're still just pretending. You glance up at the sky. It's darkening now. That deep Arctic twilight where the world turns soft and blue, shadows stretching long across the snow. The horizon blurs into the sky, and for a moment, you feel like you're floating, weightless, timeless, part of the landscape rather than a visitor in it. The cold has dulled everything else. Your hunger, your thirst, even the sharp edges of your thoughts. All that's left is the rhythm of your breath, the crunch of your boots, the faint, soft panting of the dogs. And somewhere in that quiet, a thought drifts into your mind. A memory, maybe, or something you read once. How the last days of so many Arctic expeditions weren't marked by dramatic endings, but by slow, gentle fading. A man sits down to tie his bootlaces, and never gets back up. A crewmate stops for a rest, just for a moment, and closes his eyes. A tent grows quiet, the bodies inside slowly turning to ice. There are no grand farewells here, just the long, quiet hush of the Arctic taking what it always takes. Your steps slow. The dogs stop, circling in tight, instinctive swirls, their bodies curling into small, compact shapes. They know what's coming. The wind sighs softly, a long, slow breath, and the snow begins to fall again. Light, fine, almost gentle, as if the Arctic itself is tucking you in for the night. You lower yourself to the ground, knees creaking, breath shuddering in your chest. The snow is soft beneath you, a strange, almost comforting cushion. You close your eyes for a moment, just to rest, and the darkness behind your eyelids is warm, velvety, inviting. The cold feels far away now, like a sound you heard in a dream. The dogs settle around you, their bodies pressed close, sharing what little warmth they have left. Your thoughts drift, soft and slow, like the snow falling on your face. You think of the men who came before you, their names fading in the frost. Franklin, Ross, Greeley, Crozier. You wonder if they, too, felt this strange, peaceful quiet in their last moments. If they heard the soft sigh of the wind, the gentle shifting of the snow. If they felt the Arctic closing in, not as an enemy, but as something vast and eternal, ready to fold them into its endless white embrace. You breathe in, slowly, feeling the air rasp in your chest, and you think, absurdly, of the small, strange things you've learned out here. That whale blubber can be used as fuel, that reindeer fur is warmer than sealskin, that you can get sunburned even in the snow, that sometimes the best way to survive is to stop fighting and let the cold carry you. And as the darkness deepens, you feel your body growing still, your breath slowing, the snow gently settling on your face, your shoulders, your hands. The Arctic holds you now, quiet and soft, a blanket of silence and snow. The dogs press close, their eyes half closed, their bodies curled tight, and the wind hums its endless, quiet lullaby. The world fades to white, to gray, to nothing. The story slows, the cold wraps around you, and you feel almost weightless. You let go, you drift, and the Arctic waits, quiet and patient, for the next set of footsteps. Now dim the lights. Let the hum of the wind carry you. Let the snow soften into dreams. Let the story fade gently, quietly, into sleep.